Ashley Perry is a strategic consultant, content manager, and creator, and public relations advisor to heads of state governments, individuals, companies, and organizations in a variety of fields and areas. He is also the founder of Reconector, an organization established to strengthen the Jewish people through a reconnection between the descendants of Spanish and Portuguese Jewish communities and the Jewish world. He was instrumental in promoting the legislation in the Knesset for November 30th to be accepted as the day of commemoration of the Jews of Arab lands and Iran.
Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we want to, if you could tell us a little bit about what drove you to help establish this day and what you think the significance of it is.
Thank you very much, Drora. So I'd like to take us a little bit further back. I see Dr. Shimon Ochayon is still online, but I'd like to take this further back really to its infancy. And the process for this really began in 2008, 2009. During that time, we had a new government, and I was asked to join the office of then Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon. And I remember sitting with Danny and talking about what our agenda is going to be over the next few years. And I said to him, as the son of an immigrant from Algeria, perhaps one of the issues we should take on was the issue of the Jews from Middle East and North Africa. And he basically said to me, you have a green light, let's go for it. So there's a lot that we did. We wrote a paper for the National Security Council on the need to have more official sort of sites in Israel, including a museum, which we're hoping to build in the coming years. Dror is working with us obviously on that and various other things. And after a certain amount of time, we decided one of the things lacking on the Israel and perhaps even international diaspora Jewish calendar was a day to remember the Exodus, the expulsion, however you want to put it, the departure of the Jews from Middle East and North Africa, because it was surely lacking. You know, there was nothing on the calendar really that represented, especially in Israel, where the majority of Jews come from the Middle East and North Africa, there was nothing representing this community. So we wrote an initial draft, and those who understand the vagaries of Israeli government system know that there's a sort of firewall, or supposedly a firewall, between the government and the legislature. And as the Deputy Foreign Minister, he was not able to introduce a law. So at the time, we were looking to introduce it as an executive order. The problem with that is that an executive order can be relatively easily overturned by a subsequent government. And in the end, it just didn't work out. It was supposed to go through a government minister. At the time, it was Uzi Landau, who was in charge of national ceremonies, dates, etc. And we worked very well with him, but in the end, it just didn't work out. And in 2013, if I'm not much mistaken, Shimon will be able to correct me on this, Shimon became a member of Knesset, and we brought this law, which had already been drafted, to him. It went through a number of changes, obviously, to basically create this day. And I just want to talk about the three major elements in it, and then one important but less, let's say, crucial element of this. There were three legs to this law. The first is, and we approached each minister to make sure that it was, a real central part. The foreign minister, who at the time was Victor Lieberman, who we worked very well with, and Shimon was in his political party, so it was a relatively easy conversation, and one that he supported, was to make sure, as foreign minister, in the law it said that the foreign minister is obligated to ensure that this issue is brought up when relevant in international discussions, and that on the date itself, November 30th, subsequently it was November 30th, our embassies and consulates would ensure that events would be held around the world to mark this day. The second leg was the ministry, which was the relevant ministry in charge of the issue of the Jews in the Middle East and North Africa, was at that time, it was called the Ministry of Pensioners Affairs. This was an old deal between Rafi Eitan, who was Minister of Pension Affairs, and then Prime Minister Netanyahu, where the issue would be brought out of the Ministry of Justice and put into his ministry. He wanted to obviously have more meat to his ministry, so he asked for that and he got it. So from that moment onwards, the issue would always be put in the Pensions Affairs. Now I believe it's social equality. And he obligated himself, he agreed to obligate himself to hold a national official ceremony and to have any official events surrounding the day under his office. And we worked at the time with Uri Orbach, who was very easy to work with and agreed to obligate himself to this. The third one was on education. And I remember during the debates in the Knesset, because obviously when a law goes through each reading, it has to go back to the committee to discuss various elements of this. And we had various bureaucrats from the education ministry who said, we don't need this. We teach about the history of the Jews in the Middle East and North Africa regularly, and tried to tell us that there was many elements in the curriculum about it. We asked them frequently to show us these elements, which on many occasions they were unable to do. But there became, not to really defame anyone in particular, but there became a bit of a fight with the education minister who didn't want this. I remember at one point we were told, just because there's a Holocaust Remembrance Day, you should have one as well, which I thought was a problematic statement. But we really, I wouldn't say fought, but there was definitely a challenge there that went back and forth. And in the end, if you look at the law, if you look at the actual wording, the education minister refused to obligate himself to ensure on one day a year, the Jews in the Middle East and North Africa would have their history told. In the end, it was something less. We had to find, I can't remember the exact Hebrew wording, but we had to find something much, much less than an obligation, something closer to a recommendation, which was obviously when we started to understand that there were certain forces out there for some reason, I was quite surprised, did not want this law to be passed. And just another point about the date. We had a bit of a debate around the date. I found a date, I believe it was in April or May, where it was with Stan Oman, who runs Justice for Jews in the US. We found a date where the Arab League debated and adopted a recommendation to place sanctions on Jews under the country's member states of the Arab League. But when we went to the government legal official, he said that we didn't have enough information for that. And short of going down to the Arab League archives in Cairo, we wouldn't be able to present. So a compromise was made, which was November 30th. I'll tell you that I was against it a little bit because I think it connects itself too much to Israel, the reestablishment of Jewish sovereignty, and basically sort of shows that nothing happened until the partition plan and the state of Israel, and everything was fine before then, which we know quite simply wasn't. The Farhud predated the partition plan and many other things. And I think that the focus of the day was really to try and place the blame where it was, on the Arab League, and not really on, Zionism, the state of Israel. But, sometimes, the perfect is the enemy of the good, as they say, and we just had to pass it through. I do remember, again, some challenges in even passing that through at the Government Committee on Legislation. For something to be adopted by the government, it has to pass by the Ministerial Committee, where every party in the coalition has to agree to it. And our representative at the time, Agriculture Minister Yair Shamir, who was very supportive and very helpful in the process, was supposed to push it through, but because of a family emergency in the middle of the meeting, he left. And without his persuasion, without naming names, other ministers who didn't want this basically ensured that it would be dropped from the agenda. So it didn't pass even through that level. We then decided, again, with the help of Yair, and obviously Shimon was centrally involved in this, to try and ensure that it got on a later date. We had one last chance to put it back up. And thankfully, through a lot of lobbying, we went to pretty much every minister on the committee and tried to argue on the merits of the law, on the basis of what we believed would best sell it to them. Thankfully, in the end, it passed through. And when it got to the Knesset floor, Nissim Ze'ev of Shas also put his name to it. He believed as someone who had passed former laws on the issue, he should be associated with it, so he was added to the law. And then when it actually reached the Knesset plenum floor, it passed through relatively easy. I think, if I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was passed through pretty easily with a very large majority. Unfortunately, I would say that since we're talking now about 7 years ago, it's unfortunate, if you speak to Israelis or even Jews around the world, the date itself today is really not on the global Jewish agenda. I think we made massive inroads, and certainly we see events around the world, whether it's organized by the Israeli embassy, as the law mandates, Jewish communities, or even in Israel in official events. But if you go to the streets of Israel and you ask the average Israeli, do you know what day it is? Do you know what today we commemorate? Do you know what this is the official national day of? I think 95% of the people wouldn't know. So I think we have a lot of work to do. The law was an important step to put down a marker to make sure that at least on one day, the history, the tradition, the heritage and the culture, and the subsequent dispossession, departure and expulsion of the Jews in the Middle East and North Africa is commemorated. But I believe that we still have a lot of work to do. So I really would encourage us all really to take this year to try and ensure that by next November 30th, this becomes a day which is on the calendar of every single global Jewish institution, educational, organizational, to ensure that the story, the 2,500 plus years of the story of the Jews in the Middle East and North Africa is told, because it's such an important element of the global Jewish story. It's an important element for global Jewish solidarity. And I just want to thank the American Sephardi Federation and the other partners to this event to ensure that at least everybody's doing their bit. And even if we're only convincing a handful more people of the need for this date to commemorate this date, I believe that we'll get there. We just have a lot of work to do.
Agreed. Thank you so much. This was very important. And one of the things you said is reaching out to me, because when we were putting this together and talking to people about it, many of them asked, what's November 30th? What's special about it? And I think that's part of what we're doing here, is spreading it around the world. So thank you for explaining it and the history of it. And I think that's an important part of it as well. So thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. See you soon.